Tonight we begin not with a storm, nor a battle, nor a curse. Tonight we begin with a brushstroke, and a girl, and a moon. There are stories loud enough to wake the world, and others, the ones we tell in whispers, in quiet corners, by the edge of a candle's glow, that are meant for resting hearts and eyes just beginning to close. This is that kind of story. It comes not with urgency, but with stillness, like the hush just before the sun sets, or the pause just before a full moon climbs above the rooftops. You are safe here. Let the day fall behind you, like a cloak set gently aside. Let the quiet take its place. Let your breath slow, and your thoughts scatter like petals on a river. In the far hills of old Japan, there once lived a girl who painted the moon so softly, so patiently, that the moon itself leaned down to see. And what happened next was not a miracle, not exactly, but it was something. Something quiet, something kind, something just for you to fall asleep to. Let us begin. The wind arrives before the light fades. It slips through the rice fields first, running its fingers over the tops of the stalks, which shiver with delight in its passing. The stalks are tall now, the heads heavy, golden, and nodding, ready to be harvested. They rustle in a language that only the birds seem to understand. A pair of sparrows lift off from the field's edge, startled by nothing, or perhaps by something only they noticed. They flit past the narrow path that runs alongside the paddies, a path made of worn stones and packed earth, shaped not by planning but by centuries of soft footsteps. There, on that path, the first child appears. She is no more than 7, barefoot, and smiling, holding a half-eaten chestnut wrapped in a folded handkerchief. Her short sleeves are tied back with cord, her hair undone from play. She walks slowly, not with tiredness, but with the casual drifting of someone who has not yet learned to measure time in anything but sunlight. Behind her, more follow, siblings, friends, a quiet boy who carries a fishing rod with no line. They pass by the low stone bridge near the shrine gate and scatter into the evening, their voices small and cheerful, never loud enough to disturb the stillness of the village that breathes around them. This is Asahimura, the village of morning sun. Though in autumn it is the village of quiet light. It does not sit on a great road. It does not boast a castle or market square. It has no scrolls written about it. It does not need them. It is a place made not of monuments, but of moments. Moments like a mother kneeling by the river's edge to rinse freshly picked mushrooms, or an elder sweeping dry leaves from temple steps with a handmade broom, or a single lantern being lit in a window, casting golden light over drying herbs and woven baskets. The village is shaped by these details. Each house is made of cedar and pine, each path drawn by memory, not map. Even the wind seems to know its way here. It winds past a group of elders sitting beneath a cypress, playing go with stones worn nearly smooth, past a cat curled under a raised porch, twitching only slightly in a half-dream, past a pair of sandals left neatly outside a door, and finally past a low house near the edge of the trees, where the light inside is dim and a girl paints quietly, without looking up. Her name is Yuna. She is 14, nearly 15, and she does not run with the other children. She does not weave cloth, nor sing at the river, nor join the village games. She does not speak often, but when she does, her voice is soft, like the inside of a bell, never struck. Yuna paints, not for coin, not for the temple, not even always for others. She paints because the world moves through her like water through silk, and when it comes out again, it leaves lines behind, smooth, careful, intentional. Her room smells faintly of crushed pine needles and powdered ink. There are scrolls stacked in bundles against the wall, each tied with silk cord. A pot of brushes sits to her left, arranged by stiffness and length. To her right, a small candle burns inside a clay holder shaped like a rabbit, its ears long, its face tilted toward the moon. The candle's light flickers across her newest scroll, a long sheet of soft white paper, still blank in its center, but bordered with the outlines of clouds, grasses, and the suggestion of a rising sky. Tonight she will paint the moon, not as it is in the astronomy scrolls, nor as the monks describe it in sermons. She will paint the moon as it appears in the still water of the mountain lake, as it hangs in the eye of the fox, as it waits behind clouds when no one else notices. A moon that feels awake. To do this, she prepares her ink with ceremony. First, she takes a shallow dish from her shelf, made of pale green ceramic with a crackle glaze. Into it, she pours water gathered from the first snow of last winter, kept frozen in the temple storehouse, then thawed only the day before. Into the water, she adds crushed pearl dust, ground fine between two stones. It takes time. Each step is slow, deliberate, as much meditation as preparation. When she stirs it with the tip of her softest brush, the ink becomes something alive. Not gray, not silver, but something between the two. It glows faintly, catching the candlelight. She tests it on a scrap of rice paper. It spreads like breath. Software even. She exhales, a sound so quiet it barely exists, and begins. The brush in Yuna's hand is made of goat hair, soft but sure, and the handle is wrapped in worn cotton, dyed a dusky indigo. It was her mother's and her grandmother's before that, though neither of them painted as Yuna does now. Her mother used it to write poetry on slips of paper for the summer festival. Her grandmother traced sutras in delicate lines she later buried at the mountain shrine. But Yuna, she draws things that are not yet poems, not yet prayers, things that simply wait to be seen. She begins at the bottom of the scroll. With barely a touch, she paints a curved line, just a hint of a hill where the wind might settle. Above it, she leaves space for grasses, then the stems of pampas, then the sky itself. The brush glides like it remembers the path already. She does not rush. Each stroke is allowed its breath, each curve its moment. The moon will wait. Outside her window, the light begins to change. The sun is dipping now, and the shadows grow long between the cedar trees. The village is wrapped in that in-between hour, not quite day, not quite night. It is when the sparrows fall quiet, when the smell of grilled sweet potato mingles with the smoke of burning pine needles, when the lanterns, just lit, blink softly in the breeze. Children have returned home, their hands sticky with fruit, their sandals dusted with the road. Inside houses, cloth doors rustle and soft voices call out, welcoming, chiding, singing. At the edge of the temple grounds, a group of monks unfolds a long mat, then place round offerings of rice dumplings upon a lacquered tray. Beside them, a shallow bowl of water to reflect the moon, and a branch of Suzuki grass to honor the season. It is the night of Tsukimi, the moon viewing, and in this village, as in many across the land, the people gather to lift their eyes and remember they are small. Yuna's brush dances once more. She has painted the slope of a distant mountain now, rising above a line of fog. On one side, she adds a tree, not full, but bare, waiting for frost. On the other, the edge of a pavilion, simple lines, hints, nothing finished. All around these shapes, space. She understands what many do not, that to paint the sky is not to fill it, it is to know how to leave it open. She mixes more of the silver ink, turning it slowly with the patience of someone who knows that time is not something to be chased. In the candle's flicker, the ink gleams. She breathes out again, then paints a circle in one clean motion, not perfect, not hard-edged, a moon, soft and alive, not watching, just present. As the moon rises, the villagers gather. They carry blankets and straw mats, sweet rice cakes and pickled plums, and jars of plum wine just opened for the occasion. Children chase fireflies with cupped hands, giggling when they escape. The temple steps become the knight's seats of honor. From here, the view is wide, fields below, mountains beyond, the river like a ribbon of light winding through it all. The moon itself has cleared the horizon now. It rises slowly, swelling in size as it climbs, its color pale amber, its face full. The elders bow their heads, murmuring old verses. The young sit in stillness they rarely hold. One by one, even the whispers quiet. Only the wind speaks now, rustling through the Suzuki grass, dancing along rooftops, brushing lightly against the paper lanterns which sway without sound. For a moment, a long, beautiful moment, nothing else is needed. In her quiet room, Yuna sets her brush down. She unrolls the full length of the scroll, holding it gently at the corners. The painting is simple, sparse, a moon, some clouds, the breath of a mountain, and the feeling of a silence. She looks at it as one might look into a pool of water, not to see herself, but to see something true. Then she places it beside her small window, leaning it so the real moon can light the paper softly, and for just a moment the silver ink seems to shimmer, not brightly, not magically, just as if the moon saw itself and recognized the gesture. Yuna smiles, not wide, not proudly, just the kind of smile that happens when a thought is finished, when something inside has been said. She pours the rest of the ink back into its small lidded pot. She wipes the brush clean. She closes the shutters gently, leaving only a narrow slit through which the moon may continue to watch. Then she lies down, her blanket pulled over her knees, her hands still faintly smelling of pearl and cedar. Outside, the village feasts softly. Inside, Yuna dreams, not of fame, nor fortune, nor praise, only of sky and ink, and the next time the moon might visit. In the courtyard of the temple, the wind carries the sound of laughter, low and musical, like water trickling over smooth stones, the kind of laughter that only happens when no one is trying to be heard. A small boy, still learning to balance on his own feet, toddles toward the lanterns. His sister gently pulls him back, wrapping her arms around his waist like a sash, steadying him without scolding. Nearby, two grandmothers arrange plates of tsukimi dango, small round rice dumplings meant to honor the shape of the moon. They place 13 on each tray, for luck and for tradition, and brush the tops lightly with a glaze of sweetened miso. The dumplings gleam faintly under the soft light of oil lamps hanging from a cedar beam. Above them, leaves rustle. The maple trees are just beginning to turn, the green giving way to amber, then to red. One leaf drifts downward and lands beside a dumpling. A quiet pause. Then the women smile and leave it there. The moon sends its greeting, one murmurs. On the far edge of the courtyard, two old men sip from steaming bowls of amazake, sweet rice wine, warm and clouded. The drink is gentle, more comforting than intoxicating, and the men savor it slowly, with long silences between each sip. They do not speak of the moon, but it lives behind their eyes, in their youth, in the names they no longer use aloud, in the nights they remember when the fields were still theirs to harvest. In this moment they need no new stories, only the old ones held without words. A gentle hush falls, the drum begins, not loudly, not to announce, but to accompany. A monk seated cross-legged on a small wooden dais taps a shallow drum with soft hands. The rhythm is steady and slow, like a heartbeat beneath layers of cloth. Not ceremonial, not performative, but familiar, something felt more than heard. It is the rhythm of the moon rising, and above the temple roofs she continues her climb, round, constant, pale as memory. Later, when the dumplings are eaten, and the wind grows cooler against the skin, the villagers begin to drift away from the temple. They do not leave all at once. They leave in pairs, in small clusters, carrying blankets folded over their arms, and children half asleep on their backs. The lanterns remain lit, swaying gently above the steps, as if bowing farewell to each soul that passes. Shoji doors slide open and close across the village like slow breaths. Tea is poured, feet are washed, and silence slowly returns. Yuna's home remains quiet. She has not joined the others at the temple tonight. She rarely does, but she knows the moon, and the moon knows her. She has watched it from her window. She has caught its shape in her brush, and now she carries its calmness with her as she rises from her mat and steps barefoot across the tatami. She lifts her scroll once more and rolls it gently from one end to the other. The ink has dried now. The shimmer is fainter, more subtle, like a dream just before waking. She ties it closed with a thread of soft green silk, the same color as her mother's sash. She does not label it, she never does. Each painting knows its name without needing to be told. Before extinguishing the candle, Yuna lifts the lid of a small wooden box beneath her desk. Inside are other scrolls, neatly rolled, some years old, others still carrying the scent of fresh ink. She places this one among them, not the newest, not the most detailed, but perhaps the truest. The flame wavers as she closes the box, then only darkness. Outside, the forest hums, not loudly, not with song or howl or echo, but with a silence that is alive. Owls blink slowly from high branches. A fox steps delicately along a path, its paws leaving barely a trace. Somewhere, far off, a river turns a bend and continues its journey. The night does not hurry, it never does, and the village does not resist it. Candles are out now, fires burn low, and every window reflects only moonlight and shadow. Those who dream tonight do so in soft colors, not bold visions, but gentle impressions, brushstrokes of memory and feeling. And in one house, at the very edge of the village, a girl lies still, her hands beneath her pillow, her breath slow and deep. In her dream, there are no words, only space and sky and the soft curved edge of something silver, not distant, not cold, but near and watching. The sky above Asahimura is wider at night, not because it has changed, but because the world below has quieted enough to notice. The stars are not crowded, but scattered, deliberate, dignified. Each holds its place with grace, refusing to compete. The moon, now fully risen, takes its throne without announcement. It does not seek admiration, it does not demand, it only offers light. A gentle fog begins to drift along the river, not thick, not eerie, just enough to blur the sharp edges of things. Lanterns glow more softly through it, branches melt into silhouette, and footsteps, even the smallest ones, vanish without a sound. The village becomes a painting, a moment between brushstrokes, caught in the long breath of the night. In the far corner of the village, a door slides open with barely a whisper. An old man steps outside, holding a small clay bowl between both hands. The steam rising from the bowl disappears almost as quickly as it forms. He does not drink. He walks, bare feet on stone, then on dirt, then on moss. The moon follows him, not with light alone, but with presence. He reaches the edge of the grove and kneels. There is no shrine here, no offering box, no altar, only an old cedar bent from age, its bark smooth where countless hands have passed. The man places the bowl at its base. The steam swirls once, then fades. He bows, not deeply, not formally, but with the ease of someone who has bowed in this spot for 70 years. And then he waits, not for a sign, not for a voice, just to be there, just to remember, just to keep the silence company. Back in her room, Yuna stirs, not awake, not fully, but the kind of stirring that lives between dreams, the kind that lifts a breath and places it gently into the air before sinking back again. In her half-dream, she is no longer in her room. She walks a path she does not recognize. There are no lanterns, no houses, only moonlight and rice fields stretching to the edge of sight. She walks without fear. The path is made of soft white paper, and her feet leave no mark. In one hand she carries her brush, in the other a scroll that has not yet been painted. Ahead a pond appears. The water is still, the surface unbroken. When she kneels beside it, the moon reflects not above her, but inside the water, deep, round, and close. She unrolls the scroll and begins to paint directly onto the pond surface. The ink floats, the lines hold. She does not wonder how. She only paints. One circle, then another. Clouds, wind, a tree. No one watches, and yet she knows. The moon sees her, not with eyes, but with a kind of understanding, as if the moon has also tried to make something beautiful and knows how it feels to wonder if anyone will ever see it. Morning does not rush to arrive. It waits at the edges of the world, watching. The stars begin to retreat one by one, not chased, but invited to rest. The moon, still round, lingers longer than usual. Its pale face now a soft silver blue, its light washed thin by the first hints of dawn. In the homes of Asahimura, blankets shift, hands stretch, tea water is set to boil, but for now the quiet remains. Yuna does not wake suddenly, her eyes open slowly, adjusting to the changing light. She hears a bird call from the maple tree outside, the faintest tap of bamboo against stone in the garden's water spout. She sits up and wraps a shawl over her shoulders. The scroll box remains closed, the brush cleaned, the ink pot sealed. But inside her, something glows. Not bright, not proud, but present, like the last silver edge of the moon just before it disappears into the morning sky. The fire is low tonight. Its glow flickers on the old stone hearth, casting slow-moving shadows against the rice paper walls. The kettle breathes quietly, a small hiss of steam now and then, rising into the beams above. The scent of roasted barley tea hangs in the air, mingling with the faint trace of cedar and the last warmth of dinner. Outside, the world has surrendered to darkness. Lanterns have been put away, doors drawn closed. The wind hums gently through the bamboo thicket beyond the house. Not sharp, not cold, just present. This is the hour for stories, not the kind you read, not the kind that live in scrolls or books, but the kind that drift from memory, passed from lips to ears, softened by time, carried in the breath between sips of tea. And so, tonight, by the light of the fire, an elder begins to speak. There once was a boy named Renji. He was not a prince, nor a hero, nor a fool. He was just a boy, quiet, ordinary, the sort of person people nod to in the morning but do not remember by night. He lived in a village nestled between two slow rivers and a range of misted hills. The village was small, like many others. Its paths were of beaten earth, its rooftops thatched with straw, its evenings filled with the rustle of paper screens and the soft chiming of bells that kept no particular time. Renji was known for one thing only. He made ink. Not the ink for tattoos, or ledgers, or contracts, but ink for painting, ink that smelled of pine and winter, ink that glimmered faintly when caught by moonlight. From the time he was small, Renji spent hours beside the hearth, grinding charcoal into fine dust with a flat stone his grandfather had carved by hand. He added rainwater collected in porcelain bowls, left outside overnight to chill and settle. He worked in silence, always silence. He didn't hum, he didn't sigh, he barely even breathed as he worked. It was as though the ink required stillness to be born, and when it was ready, dark, velvety, a black so deep it seemed to drink in light, Renji poured it into small clay molds and left them to dry beside bundles of herbs and dried persimmons. People from nearby villages came to buy his ink. They didn't speak much to him, but they noticed, as many did, that when they used Renji's ink, the brush moved differently. It flowed. Renji never painted himself. He said he didn't need to. I already know the pictures, he once told a neighbor. I just don't need to see them. But there was one thing he always watched: the moon. Each night, no matter the season, Renji would climb the slope behind the temple. He would sit on a flat stone, legs crossed, back straight, and he would simply look. He watched the moon as it waxed and waned, as it slid behind clouds and emerged again, as it shifted from white to yellow to pale orange, depending on the sky. He didn't speak to it. He didn't ask it questions. He just listened. And sometimes, in the hush between wind gusts or in the stillness of a deep snow night, he thought he heard something listening back. People in the village began to whisper that Renji had become strange. He speaks to the sky, said one. He walks without a lantern, said another. He puts feathers in his sleeves, said a child with wide eyes and a whisper. But Renji never minded. He had never asked the world to understand him. He only asked it to be quiet. And then, one winter, something changed. It was the coldest in years. The river froze solid in parts. The trees cracked at night from the cold. Birds left early and didn't return. Renji began mixing a new kind of ink. He worked by firelight long after the rest of the village had gone to sleep. The glow of his window was a faint flicker on the snowy hillside, steady and unblinking. Into his usual mix, he added strange things: powdered bone ash, gathered from an old shrine, silver dust gifted by a traveling monk, and a single black feather, long and curved, that he found on his doorstep one morning. The feather was warm to the touch. He stirred slowly, slowly, for hours. The ink thickened, the room filled with the scent of rain and fire. And when he tested it with a brush, it shimmered. Not like metal, but like moonlight on water. That night, Renji did something he had never done before. He unrolled a scroll, he dipped his brush, and he began to paint. Renji's brush moved slowly, not from hesitation, but from reverence. He was not painting a scene he had planned. He was not copying from memory or from study. He was simply allowing the ink to show him what it knew. A line curved across the parchment, delicate, arching like wind sweeping across a frozen lake. Then another and another, a grove of pines hunched with snow, a pond, its surface broken only by moonlight, a distant hill softened at the edges like breath on glass. He did not paint people. He did not need them. What he was making was not about movement or story. It was about presence, about silence, and yet, there in the middle, his hand moved with an intention he had not expected. He painted a crane. It stood in the snow, wings slightly open, as though it had just landed or was about to take flight. Renji had never seen a crane in person. He had only heard of them in poems and travelers' songs. But his brush knew its shape. The long neck, the narrow beak, the curve of wing that felt like a bow held midair, and as the ink dried, it shimmered where he had used the silver dust. Not brightly, just enough that when the light from his lantern hit it, the bird seemed to glow. He sat back and looked at what he had made. He felt still, not proud, not tired, just deeply, wholly still, as though he had finally said something he'd carried for years. The next night he walked alone to the riverbank. The snow crunched beneath his sandals. The moon was high, round and pale, its light unbroken by cloud or branch. He carried the scroll wrapped in silk. There was no audience, no ritual, just the sound of moving water beneath the ice and the distant call of some bird returning to roost. He laid the scroll gently on a flat rock by the river. Then he bowed once, deeply, his hands flat on the snow, and he left it there. He did not turn back to look. In the morning, the scroll was gone, not torn, not buried in snow, just gone. Only a single feather remained. It was long, white, its spine glowed faintly in the morning light. Renji picked it up and held it in his hands for a long time. Then he went back inside, placed the feather in a small wooden box beside his inkstone, and said nothing, not to anyone. From that day on, his ink moved differently. It no longer resisted the brush. It no longer pooled in strange ways or dried with uneven shine. Even the other painters noticed. One old calligrapher, who visited only twice a year, leaned in close to a freshly written character and said, "It listens." Renji only smiled. He did not paint the crane again, not for a long time, but when he painted the moon, and he did often, it always felt a little closer, as if from far above she had seen his gift and accepted it. The seasons turned. Spring crept into the valley with the soft click of bamboo buds opening. Summer followed, loud with frogs and heavy rains. Autumn brought red leaves and the scent of chestnut smoke, and winter, Renji's favorite, arrived with its hush and its sky like pale silk. Time moved slowly in the village. Nothing much changed. Children grew taller. Roofs were mended. Old stories were told again in the same way they always had been, and Renji grew older. He was not a man who rushed. Even his aging was gentle. His hair grayed slowly, like mist creeping into the corners of a room. His steps grew smaller, not from pain, but from care. He still made ink, still stirred soot and silver, still ground his stone beneath the window each morning as the sun warmed the tatami mat. beneath his knees. But he did so with fewer words, even fewer than before. His hands, though slower, remained steady. Each movement was deliberate, each breath matched the rhythm of his brushstrokes. And though no one said so, people from other villages now waited longer for his work. They paid more, they spoke more softly when they entered his shop, because they sensed it. That what Renji created was no longer just ink. It was memory, and memory has weight. Renji never forgot the scroll he had left at the river. Sometimes when the snow fell just right, or the wind carried a high, whistling note through the trees, he would look toward that bend in the river and feel something stir behind his ribs. Not regret, not sorrow, just a quiet knowing, a reminder that something had happened that he didn't need to explain. One winter evening he sat by the fire longer than usual. The house was silent save for the pop of sap in the firewood and the faint drip of melting snow from the eaves. Renji opened a small wooden box, one he had not touched in years. Inside, wrapped in old rice paper, was the white feather. It was unchanged, not yellowed, not brittle, still soft, still whole. He ran a finger along its spine and thought of the crane he had painted so long ago. Not its shape, he remembered that clearly, but its feeling, the sense of pause, of reaching without effort, of listening for something older than sound. Renji did not sleep that night. He did not try. Instead, he lit a single candle, unrolled a fresh scroll, and began to paint again. But not the same scene, not the same pond, not the same snow. This time the crane was flying, not upward, not away, but across, as if following something the eye could not see. The wings were wide, the neck stretched, the eyes open, and below it, Renji painted the curve of the moon. Not high in the sky, but low, almost as if it had descended to meet the bird in the middle of the world. He painted until the candle burned low, and when the last stroke dried, he bowed to the scroll, just as he had bowed to the first one so many winters ago. But this time he did not take it to the river. He set it gently against the wall beside the hearth, and sat down beside it with his hands folded. The feather rested on the mat beside him, and he waited. Outside the wind shifted, not sharply, not with storm, but with intent. It rustled the dry stalks of winter reeds. It brushed gently through the trees with a sound like a sleeve sliding over silk. Inside, Renji sat motionless beside his scroll. The candle had gone out. The room was dim, but not dark. Moonlight filtered through the shoji screen, pale and cool, casting long shadows across the floor. And in that moment, quiet, breathless, eternal, Renji heard something. Not a footstep, not a voice, but a sound that vibrated through the wooden floor, through his bones, through the space between the beating of his heart. A low, soft flutter, then another, and then silence. He stood slowly, bones clicking, joints patient from years of kneeling. He walked to the door, slid it open, and there, standing just beyond the threshold, bathed in moonlight as if shaped from it, was a crane. Its feathers glowed silver blue, its neck curved like a question that did not need answering, its wings folded, relaxed, as though it had been waiting for this moment since the beginning of time. Renji did not speak. He did not bow. He simply stepped aside, and the crane walked into the house. Its movements were unhurried, software silent. It paused before the painted scroll, tilted its head, looked. Then, slowly, it lowered its beak until it touched the center of the moon Renji had painted, and in that touch, The ink shimmered again, as though it had been waiting all these years to awaken. Renji watched, his breath shallow, not from fear, not from wonder, but from stillness, a stillness so complete it felt like memory. The crane turned, it met his eyes, and then, without sound, it extended its wings and took a single, slow step toward the open door. Outside, the night air was calm. No leaves moved, no clouds passed. The world had stilled itself for this. The crane stepped into the moonlight. It did not leap. It did not run. It simply rose, wings extended, lifted, drifted, climbed. Its feathers caught the moon's glow until it looked less like a bird and more like a stroke of silver across an ink-black sky. Renji watched until it vanished beyond the ridge of the hills. He did not cry. He did not smile. He simply turned back to the hearth, sat down, and closed his eyes. The scroll remained beside him. Its ink no longer shimmered, its moon now matte and quiet. But the memory, the story, would be passed on, not written, not signed, but told by firelight, in soft voices, when the wind turned cold and the tea grew still. The fire has burned low again, only embers now, glowing like the eyes of small creatures watching from the edge of dream. The kettle has long gone silent. The teacups are empty, their warmth clinging only faintly to ceramic. The shadows in the room have grown long and smooth, like spilled ink across old parchment. And so the elder's voice fades too, not with a full stop, not with a final line, but with the kind of quiet that lets a story keep living. In the back of the mind, in the hush of breath just before sleep. They say no one ever saw Renji again after that night. Not in the village, not on the temple slope, not in the markets where he once traded his ink. Some say he left, others say he passed, but most believe he became part of the sky, a stroke of brushwork too fine to name. The scroll he painted was never found. The feather, too, vanished. Some say it turned to smoke. Some say the crane took it back. But the story remains. It is told in different ways. Some tell it as a fable about a gift given with no need of return. Others tell it as a ghost tale, soft and sad, and still others, like tonight, speak it as it was meant to be spoken by firelight, with tea, with time, and with quiet. So if you ever find yourself walking beneath the full moon, and you feel a breeze that carries no sound, and you glimpse something white passing overhead, not quickly, not loudly, but gently, you may wonder, you may pause, you may look up, and if you do, perhaps you will feel it too, that stillness, that understanding, that feeling of being watched, not judged, not measured, just seen. And when you return home, perhaps with nothing but moonlight on your shoulders and the scent of cold pine in your sleeves, you may light a small candle. You may unroll a scroll, or open a notebook, or dip your fingers in paint, and you may make something, not for selling, not for praise, but because something in the night whispered that you should. That is the end of the tale, but not the end of its meaning. Let it settle in your chest like a warm cup of barley tea. Let it drift across your thoughts like a crane across a winter sky. Let it follow you, not loudly, but gently, into sleep. It is not paved, it is not marked. And if you ask the villagers, most will say it is no longer there. But if you walk past the stone bridge and past the elder pine where the wind always turns east, and follow the curve where mushrooms grow in a perfect crescent, you will find it. A trail not wide enough for carts, lined with moss, soft beneath the feet. The trees there grow differently, not taller, but quieter. Their branches lean together in whispered conversation, and the forest floor is so thick with needles and leaves that your steps make no sound at all. Here, even the birds do not sing, only the wind moves, slowly, gently, as though remembering how. A long time ago, before the village had a name, before the temple bell was cast, before Renji ground his first ink, there stood a shrine in this forest. It was carved directly into the hill, not built atop it, but woven into it. The entrance was small, framed in dark wood and root, almost hidden from view, unless the sun hit it just so. And they say it hummed, not always, not every night, but on certain evenings, usually when the moon was high and thin like a shaving of silver, there was a sound, deep and soft, like the space between two heartbeats. They called it the Root Shrine. Though no one is sure that was ever its true name, it was never recorded, no priests were assigned to it, no offerings were required, but still the villagers left small gifts there, a folded leaf filled with salt, a sliver of dried persimmon, a pebble painted with a single line, not because they feared it, but because they felt something when they stood before it, a pressure in the air, a stillness in the chest, as though something was listening, not watching, listening. The stories say the shrine was tended to, once, by a woman. She wore robes the color of old bark and walked barefoot, even in winter. She did not speak often, but when she did, her voice was like cool water, calm, with no ripples. No one knew where she lived. She simply appeared, walking out from between the trees like mist, always when needed. Some said she was a priestess, others said she was a spirit, but all agreed she was never young and she never aged. Children were not allowed near the shrine, but as with all things forbidden, they found ways, and one such child, a boy named Izo, once crept there after sunset. He brought nothing but curiosity and a rice cake tucked in a cloth napkin. He followed the forest trail without a lantern, guided only by the moon and the hush of trees. When he reached the shrine, he expected something dramatic, a glow, a sound, a gust of wind, but there was nothing, only the curve of the earth, only a doorway woven with root and vine, barely taller than his shoulders. He crouched, he stepped inside, and in that moment he heard it, not a voice, not a word, but a hum, low and warm, rising from the ground, as if the shrine itself were exhaling after a long sleep. Izo froze. He did not run, he did not scream. He simply stood, breath caught in his throat, feeling the sound as much in his feet as in his ears. And then, in the back corner of the shrine, he saw a faint shape, not solid, not light, just a shimmer like heat above stone. It pulsed once, and the rice cake slipped from his hand. The next morning, Izo was found asleep beneath the elder pine, his hair damp with dew, his shoes neatly placed beside him. He said nothing for 3 days. When he finally spoke, he simply said, "She wasn't alone." And he never went near the forest again. In the years that followed, no one saw the shrine keeper again, not clearly, but now and then, on misted mornings when the trees held their breath, or on late afternoons when crows circled without cawing, someone would see a figure, a robe glimpsed between trunks, a shadow pausing beside a stone, and always barefoot. The children began to invent stories, that she had leaves for hair, that her eyes reflected moonlight even at midday, that she could speak to the roots of the trees and hear them speak back. But the elders never corrected them. Perhaps they believed it, or perhaps they remembered more than they admitted. There was a woman, an old one, older than even the head monk, who once said that the shrine keeper was not the first. She is chosen, the woman said softly to her granddaughter by the fire, and when her time is done, the shrine hums again. That's how the next one knows. The granddaughter, a girl named Sachi, nodded but didn't ask further. She had heard the hum once herself. In the winter, when the snow was thick and the air was too cold to carry scent, she had been gathering firewood and wandered too far. And then there it was, that sound, that deep vibration in the chest, as if the ground itself had inhaled her presence and gently held it. She turned away that day, but never forgot. And when she grew older, she often wandered near that part of the forest, not close enough to disturb it, but near enough to feel its weight, like the hush in a room after someone has whispered your name. Over time, people stopped speaking of the shrine, not out of fear, not out of loss, but out of a strange sort of reverence. They walked new paths, they built new roads. The cedar grove grew thicker, the roots pressed deeper, and the shrine, it waited. 1 year, during the heaviest summer rains the village had seen in decades, the eastern slope of the forest cracked. Mud slid, trees bent, and for the first time in over a generation, the mouth of the shrine was visible again. A group of boys found it while searching for washed-up berries. It was almost completely hidden, swallowed by the hill, its lintel broken, its entrance gnawed with vines thick as arms. One of them, a boy named Hero, leaned close. He pressed his hand to the wood, and the moment he did, he heard it. That hum, low, clear, unmistakable, it stopped his breath in his throat. He stumbled back, said nothing, and that night he drew what he had seen in charcoal on a piece of cloth, a doorway, a circle above it, a pattern inside, a spiral slowly unfurling. He hid the cloth beneath his sleeping mat. When his grandmother found it months later, she folded it once, twice, 3 times, and placed it into the hollow of a cedar tree just beyond the elder pine. She whispered something into the hollow before walking away. No one saw her do it. No one spoke of it. But the tree, they say, grew taller that year. They say roots remember, even when branches forget, even when villages fade, and names wear smooth from the stone, roots still hold stories. Deep down, where water moves slower than time, where the world is soft and dark and dreaming, there are memories, and the root shrine, the one that slept beneath the hill, was full of them. One of the oldest legends, told only in whispers and always near a fire, claimed the shrine was not built but grown, that before it was ever hollowed out, it had once been a great tree, a tree so large its roots touched the edge of every well in the valley, a tree whose trunk hummed at night like a low flute, and when the tree died, it didn't fall, it simply turned inward, became something else, and those who still walked the forest paths sometimes felt that truth, not in sight, but in feeling, in the way their shoulders straightened as they neared the cedar grove, in the way their breath slowed, their steps softened, in the way the air changed, denser but not heavy, as if they were being gently cradled by the memory of something once vast. One rainy spring, when the plum blossoms had just begun to fade, a scholar visited the village. He wore robes dyed the color of wet ash and carried scrolls bound in leather thongs. His name was not recorded, but he left behind a fragment, written in small, patient characters on the back of a rice order. In the forest east of the village, the soil holds a breath. I stood at the base of a cedar and felt it beneath my feet, the pulse of something waiting. Not in malice, not in hunger, simply waiting. The rice merchant used that note to wrap an old fish, but the boy who received it, his name was Now, read it first. He copied the words before the ink bled and buried them in the wall of the storehouse. Decades later, when the storehouse was torn down, that paper was still there, faded but intact. Many years passed. The shrine was left alone, the roots thickened, the path narrowed, but there were still nights, still rare, trembling moments when someone walking alone, far past where they meant to turn, would stop, would look down, would feel it, the quiet hum like wind inside a hollow flute, like the earth breathing out, and each of them would carry that silence back with them, not speaking of it, not naming it, but holding it, as if the shrine had whispered something only they could understand. In the quietest part of winter, when the nights were longest and the frost drew flowers on the windows, a few villagers observed a ritual. They did not call it that. They did not name it at all. It was not on any calendar, and no bell announced it. But those who remembered the old ways, or rather, those who remembered to listen, would carry a small lantern out past the elder pine, always alone, always without words. The lantern was not meant to illuminate the path. Its glow was too soft for that. It was meant as an offering, a way of saying, I am still here, are you? They would walk until the ground changed beneath their feet, from the soft give of loam to something older, tighter, woven with root and time, and there they would stop. They would not knock, not bow, not speak. They would place the lantern down, step back 3 paces, and close their eyes. Some stood in silence for a minute, others waited until the candle burned low, and then they left. When they returned in the morning, the lantern was always gone, not broken, not melted, gone, as if it had never been there, but the place where it had rested was always slightly warmer, as though the earth had held it for a while, then let it go. The children noticed too. They saw their elders carry the little lanterns each winter, and though they were told not to follow, some did. They hid behind trees, covered their mouths with scarves, watched with wide, unblinking eyes. One girl, Hannah, once told her brother what she saw. She didn't walk into the forest. She became part of it. He didn't understand, neither did she, not fully, but she never asked again. And when she grew older, she made her own lantern. It was small, made of mulberry paper and twine. She carried it in the hush before dawn and left it near the roots. And when she came home, she didn't light another for many years, because she no longer needed to ask. By then, few people remembered why the shrine had once hummed. Fewer still remembered the woman with bark-colored robes. But the feeling remained, that pause in the heart, that breath beneath the soil, that sense that something, somewhere, still listened. The shrine beneath the roots was never found again, not fully. The forest deepened, the slope shifted, storms came and went, and trees fell, and new paths were made, but no one could say where the entrance had once been. Some believed it had closed itself, others said it had never truly been there to begin with, and yet, on certain nights when the moon was low and the snow muffled all but breath, some still felt it, that hum, not loud, not sudden, just a gentle tremor in the soles of their feet, a memory perhaps passed through roots and mist. The elders said nothing, but when they stirred the fires before dawn, or looked out the window with eyes that had seen too much and still longed for something unnamed, they sometimes smiled, not because they remembered, but because they were remembered. And the forest? It did what forests do. It held the silence. It wrapped the forgotten in moss. It turned stories into soil, and soil into trees, and trees into new places for memory to rest. Once, years later, a traveler asked the villagers if there were any ruins nearby, places of old belief, shrines without names. They shrugged. There are only trees, they said. But one child, quiet, observant, tugged gently at the traveler's sleeve and whispered, "If you bring a lantern into the cedar grove and stand very still, you might hear a sound that isn't wind." The traveler smiled, and though they did not go that night, they left a candle burning in the window, just in case the forest was listening, and so the shrine remains, not in maps or carvings, not in stories shouted or printed, but in the hush between thoughts, in the hush between dreams. You may never find it with your eyes, but if you close them and breathe and listen long enough, you may feel it, a breath, a hum, a presence beneath your feet, still waiting, still remembering, still there. High above the forested valley, where the clouds moved slow and low and the wind had no sharp edges, a temple sat upon a stone shelf in the mountain's side. It was not grand, its roofs were not gilded, its gates were not tall, but it was known, known by travelers who followed the sound of bells through mist, known by stargazers who said the moon shone brighter there, known by villagers far below who sometimes saw lanterns moving like stars against the cliffs, and once a year, when the moon was fullest, when it sat like a silver coin at the crown of the night, the temple held its quietest celebration, the moon feast. No drums, no shouting, no clamor, just robes slowly pressed, food slowly prepared, candles slowly lit. The monks did not speak of it until the day came, and even then they only said, "It is nearly time." In the morning they swept the stones clean, no leaves, no dust, no petals from the wild plum tree, only bare, clean rock under soft footfalls. Then they began the preparations. Bamboo mats unrolled, tables placed with care. Not long tables, but many small ones, enough for each guest to eat without raising their voice. At midday the kitchen was filled with the scent of root and smoke. Daikon radish sliced into thin spirals, pickled plums glistening, rice steamed with chestnut, wild herbs gathered days earlier by novices walking barefoot in dew, everything made by hand, everything arranged in silence. Even the sound of knives was muted as if the blades knew they were carving for moonlight, not hunger. By dusk the air had cooled, a gentle blue settled over the stones. The monks changed into ceremonial robes, simple, flowing, pale as winter ash, and slowly the guests arrived. Not many. Some were other monks from sister temples, some were elders from distant valleys, a few were travelers who had followed lantern light from a road that most maps forgot. Each was greeted with a bow. Each was offered warm water with plum blossom petals. No one asked names. No one explained their presence. The feast was not for speaking. It was for remembering. As night unfolded like soft silk across the mountain, the temple plateau filled with quiet life. Dozens of small lanterns lined the paths, each flame no brighter than a firefly, each glass painted with moon and mountain motifs. Some faded from years of careful use. The monks moved like the wind through pine, present, unseen, never hurried. One by one, dishes were placed on the tables. Clay bowls of soba noodles in warm mushroom broth, tiny porcelain dishes of sesame and pickled fern, red bean buns, brushed with rice syrup until they gleamed, and always a bowl of white rice, simple, perfectly formed, garnished with a single violet petal. Not for color, for reverence. The guests sat cross-legged on the bamboo mats. No one reached for food immediately. First came the moon offering. A wide, shallow bowl of water was placed on a low stone altar, its surface so still it mirrored the night sky. One monk stepped forward, not the oldest, not the leader, just one. He knelt before the bowl, held his palms to the sky, and whispered one word, softly, so only the moon could hear. Then he stepped back, and the feast began. But it was not a feast of noise. Chopsticks moved gently. Tea was poured with care, no laughter, only glances exchanged and nods, half smiles shared across candlelight. The food was not extravagant, but it was quiet. Each flavor familiar, each texture kind, as if the dishes remembered the guests better than the guests remembered themselves. The wind passed through the courtyard once, carrying a single leaf that fluttered across the stones. No one looked up, but several paused, their bowls in hand, as if acknowledging a guest who needed no seat. From the trees came a faint sound, not music exactly, more like tones carried on air. A monk seated just beyond the inner wall was plucking a koto. His fingers moved slowly, his head bowed. The notes spilled out like drops of water from a high ledge. They did not fill the space. They threaded through it, tying one silence to the next. Then came the second course, clear soup with mountain greens, followed by a soft rice cake, still warm, filled with crushed sweet chestnut. One guest bowed their head slightly before taking the first bite, as if remembering a parent, or a teacher, or a place that no longer stood. Another wiped a corner of their eye, but did not cry. There was no need. The mountain already carried enough memory for all of them. The moon climbed higher, slow, certain and full, a perfect circle above the mountains, casting a silver light across every stone, every sleeve, every face. It was not bright, it did not dazzle, but it illuminated without question, as though all things beneath it had always belonged to its light. No one spoke, still, and yet the courtyard was full, not just with people, but with presence, the kind that lives in pauses, in footfalls on dry stone, in the warmth of tea shared under the stars, the kind of presence that feels like listening. After the third course, a small grilled river fish, laid whole and untouched by seasoning, the monks moved quietly through the rows, carrying bowls of incense. Each bowl gave off a slow, rising curl of blue smoke, scented with cedar and pine resin, and something older, dried petals from a flower that no longer grew near the temple, but which had been preserved in tightly sealed boxes for years. The smoke didn't drift far. It hung just above the tables, weaving between guests as though searching for familiar faces. Then came the final act of the feast, the lantern circle. Each guest was given a paper lantern, small, round, and painted with a single hand-drawn symbol. Some had cranes, others river stones. One bore only a single line, straight, firm, unbroken. No one explained the meanings. The symbols were for the moon, and the moon, it was said, never needed things explained. The guests stood, quietly, bowed once toward the temple's inner gate, and followed a gentle slope behind the main hall. There the monks had laid out small wooden boards across a shallow pond, smooth planks that dipped slightly with each step. Each guest walked across the water and placed their lantern gently upon its surface, then turned and stepped away. One by one, the lanterns floated. They did not drift far. There was no current, but they spread out just enough to make the pond glow like a second sky. Above, the moon; below, its reflection, broken softly by ripples of floating light. The monks knelt by the edge, not praying, not bowing, simply sitting. Their silence was not empty. It was full of things that had no need for sound, the kind of silence that comes after a long-held breath, the kind that feels like being remembered. The lanterns burned for hours. Some flickered, some leaned into each other, some floated alone, but none went out. The wind was too respectful, the night too still. From the edge of the pond, the guests watched in silence. No applause, no farewell, no call to depart, only presence, only light, only the moon, round and undisturbed, watching herself in water. Eventually, the monks stood, one by one, unhurried. They walked back toward the temple, bare feet silent on stone. The guests followed, not in rows, not in line, but in rhythm, as if guided by a song they all knew, but none had ever sung aloud. Inside, the tatami rooms were warm. A single kettle steamed, low cushions circled the hearth. Thin paper walls glowed with the soft breath of candlelight. The guests were offered hot barley tea. Most accepted, not out of thirst, but to hold something warm while their hearts adjusted back to wait. Some stayed the night. Others began the journey down the mountain, carrying the silence with them, and even those who left said very little. There was no need. What the feast offered could not be spoken, not fully. It stayed in the bones, in the breath, in the quiet between one thought and the next. And for weeks afterward, villagers in distant places would wake in the night, unsure why, and feel calm, as if the moon had passed just a little closer that year, as if something sacred had brushed gently across their dreams. The feast was held again the next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, always the same, always different, and always, somewhere between the second cup of tea and the final lantern, each guest would feel it, that hush, that fullness, that sense that they were standing not beside the sacred, but within it, not alone, never alone. That is how the mountain remembers, not in stones, not in chants, but in the warmth of rice, in the weight of water, in the glow of a lantern carried without question into the night.